My fiancée and her parents crossed a line I could never ignore. They mocked my late mother, right there at the rehearsal dinner, in front of everyone. So I stood up and called off the wedding on the spot. No hesitation, no second guessing. But let's rewind to the start, because trust me, what my fiancée did in the end will leave you speechless. I'm 33 now, and not too long ago, I was engaged to Claire, a woman I genuinely believed I'd grow old with. We met around 6 years back, thanks to some mutual friends who invited us both to a backyard cookout. She had this bright, contagious smile and a quick wit that kept everyone laughing. We hit it off instantly. A year ago, I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me. Didn't even need to think it over. It felt right, she felt right. But when I proposed, it wasn't just Claire I was bringing into my life. Her parents, Gregory and Linda, came as part of the package. And let me tell you, they're the type who always need to be the loudest in the room. Big personalities, full of opinions, and never shy about sharing them. At first, I chalked it up to them just being those kinds of people, you know. But the more time I spent around them, the more I noticed their attitude wasn't just noise, it was entitlement, plain and simple. They always acted like the world owed them something. Before I get into what really happened, you need to know about my mom. Her name was Margaret, and to this day, she's the kindest, most selfless person I've ever known. She passed away 2 years ago after a long, brutal fight with cancer. 3 years of doctor visits, chemo, and pain, but she still managed to think of others first. Watching her go through that with grace and strength changed me forever. She showed me what it meant to be generous, to be compassionate, and to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. She wasn't just my mom, she was the kind of person who'd show up quietly, do what needed to be done, and never ask for credit. She had this natural way of helping people without making them feel small or like they owed her anything. Honestly, she was a lifeline for a lot of folks. That included Claire's family. Gregory and Linda owe her more than they'll probably ever admit. But you wouldn't know it from the way they talk about her now. When I first brought Claire home to meet my mom, it seemed fine. My mom told me she liked her, and Claire was polite enough. But as things got more serious between us, I started noticing subtle digs from Claire, little comments, like calling my mom a bit much or saying she was too involved. Those remarks didn't sit right with me, but I brushed them off at the time. I figured maybe Claire was just trying to find her place in a new family dynamic. I wish I'd paid more attention back then. Because what a lot of people don't know is just how much my mom did for Claire's parents. Years ago, when Gregory and Linda's restaurant was barely hanging on, my mom stepped in. She co-signed a loan for them when no one else would. She believed in them, even when the banks didn't. Then she helped them sort out their finances, showed them how to restructure things, and basically gave them a second shot at staying in business. And it worked. The place pulled through. Gregory and Linda were able to keep the doors open, feed their family, and rebuild. But it didn't end there. Later on, their industrial oven, basically the heart of the kitchen, went out, and they couldn't afford a new one. Without even blinking, my mom paid for a replacement. Out of her own pocket. She didn't ask for repayment, not even when her own medical bills started piling up. That's just who she was, always giving, even when she didn't have much to give. Then there was Claire's older brother, Aaron. The guy was about to drop out of college because he couldn't scrape together enough for his final semester. That's when my mom stepped in, again. She paid his tuition so he could graduate on time. She used to say, education is the one thing no one can ever take from you. And with her, it was never just about money. She gave her time, her energy, real effort. She'd spend hours helping Claire's family with everything from going over their books to watching Aaron's kids so he could actually sit down and study. And you know what? Not once did Gregory, Linda, or Aaron ever really thank her. I mean, yeah, they said the occasional, thanks, but it always felt like an afterthought, nothing that matched the size of what she did for them. My mom never seemed to care about that part, though. She wasn't the kind of person who needed applause or recognition. Helping people was just who she was. When she passed, it wrecked me. She was my anchor, my steady place in a world that constantly shifted. Losing her felt like losing a part of myself that I'd never get back. Claire was there during that time, or at least I thought she was. She showed up physically, but emotionally. Looking back, her version of support felt hollow. Surface level. She'd say stuff like, "You've got to move on," or, "Your mom wouldn't want you stuck in grief forever." Maybe there was truth in those words, but they didn't bring comfort. They felt like someone trying to shut the door on a chapter one wasn't ready to end. Cold. Rushed. As we got closer to the wedding, more warning signs started showing up. Whenever I brought up including something about my mom in the ceremony, Claire would just brush it off. One time I mentioned wanting to say a few words about her in my vows, a small tribute, and Claire immediately shut it down with, "Isn't that going to bring the mood down? Weddings are supposed to be happy." That stung. But I let it go. I didn't want to pick a fight so close to the big day. But it wasn't just that. It kept happening. Little digs, little dismissals that slowly chipped away at me. And then there were her parents. Gregory and Linda had this way of talking down to me, like they couldn't quite believe their daughter had settled for someone like me. Gregory once made a joke, if you can call it that, about how Claire was trading up by marrying me, as if she was moving out of a bad neighborhood or something. Linda wasn't much better. She'd throw in passive-aggressive gems like, "We all make sacrifices for love," like Claire was doing some kind of charity work by agreeing to be with me. It hurt, but I stayed quiet. For Claire's sake. I thought, maybe once we're married and everyone chills out, this weird tension will go away. I kept believing it would get better. God, I wish I'd spoken up sooner. Because a month before the wedding, everything really started falling apart. Like I mentioned earlier, Claire's parents decided they'd host the rehearsal dinner. They picked this upscale restaurant they had some kind of connection to, fancy place, white tablecloths, the whole deal. At first, I took it as a kind gesture. I thought maybe this was their way of making up for all the digs and tension from the past few months. I even told myself, okay, this could be their peace offering. A sign they're finally trying to show some respect. But man, was I wrong. From the start, it was more about the show than the actual dinner. Gregory and Linda didn't just offer to host, they made sure everyone knew just how generous they were being. Every other conversation with Linda turned into her gushing about how much effort they were putting into the night. "Oh, this dinner's going to be the event of the season," she'd say. "We've worked so hard to make it perfect, it's going to be the talk of the town." And of course, Gregory never missed an opportunity to chime in. He kept reminding everyone, me included, that this restaurant was one of the finest around, like we should all be grateful they managed to book it. What was supposed to be a kind gesture started to feel more like a flex. It wasn't about celebrating us, it was about feeding their egos. Still, I tried not to dwell on it. I figured, hey, let them have their moment. I just wanted to make it to the wedding without more drama, so I let them take the lead on the rehearsal dinner. Huge mistake. As the day crept closer, Gregory and Linda really let their true selves show. Every conversation with them came laced with some kind of snide remark or passive-aggressive jab. Take the guest list, for example. I asked Linda if we could confirm who'd RSVP'd, and she rolled her eyes like I was a toddler tugging on her sleeve. "We'll handle it, Daniel," she said, all condescending. "You don't need to stress about the details. Just show up and enjoy." It sounded harmless, but it rubbed me the wrong way. This was our event. Shouldn't Claire and I get a say in who's attending? Then there was the menu. Linda wouldn't stop bragging about how they'd pulled together a high-end dining experience for the night. "We've got the chef preparing something really exclusive," she'd gush. Then she'd drop her favorite little jab, "Nothing like what you'd usually find back home, Daniel." That "back home" line. She used it a lot. It was her polite way of saying, "You're not like us." I grew up in a small, blue-collar town, and they never let me forget it. Every dig was a reminder that they saw me as less than, an outsider who somehow stumbled into their fancy world. Still, I kept swallowing it. I told myself it was just one night. Put on a smile, nod through the nonsense, and keep moving forward. But Claire. She started acting off too. She'd always leaned on her parents' opinions a little too much, but in those last few weeks before the dinner, it got worse. Any time I brought up something I was worried about, whether it was the guest list or just how I felt, she'd brush me off. "Daniel, you're overthinking this," she'd say. "My parents know what they're doing." But it wasn't just about a dinner anymore. It was the growing feeling that I didn't belong. That no matter how much I loved Claire, I'd always be on the outside looking in. Her family treated me like I'd somehow lucked into their daughter's life, like I should be grateful she even said yes. And Claire. She never once defended me. If anything, she made things worse, laughing off the comments or waving me away like I was making something out of nothing. Then, about a week before the dinner, something happened that should have stopped me in my tracks. Claire and I were over at her parents' house, going over some final wedding details. Linda was in full command mode, shuffling through seating charts, micromanaging flower choices like she was planning a royal gala instead of our wedding. At one point during that planning session, I suggested we switch the centerpieces to something simpler, something my mom would have appreciated. Nothing extravagant, just tasteful and meaningful. Linda didn't even lift her head from her wedding binder. She muttered, "Oh, Margaret had interesting taste, didn't she? But this is Claire's day. Let's keep it modern, shall we?" I just froze. It was such a quiet little jab, but man, it landed like a punch to the gut. My mom wasn't even around to defend herself, and here was Linda, casually taking shots at her like it was no big deal. And Claire. She didn't even blink. She just kept scrolling through her phone like she hadn't heard a thing. That silence. That hurt even more. I wanted to call Linda out, right then and there. Every part of me was itching to say something. But instead, I swallowed it. I told myself, don't ruin the day. Don't pick a fight. I let it slide, like I had with all the other little insults. Now, looking back, I hate that I stayed quiet. I hate that I let that moment pass. It wasn't just that one comment, it was everything. Every snide remark, every dismissive tone, every time they made me feel small, it all kept piling up. And I kept brushing it aside in the name of keeping the peace. I thought I was doing the right thing. Then came the day of the rehearsal dinner, and right from the jump, I could feel the tension thick in the air. Claire and I drove to the restaurant together. I tried to crack a few jokes, make small talk, anything to break the ice. But she barely looked up from her phone. When I asked if she was excited, she just shrugged and said, "It's just a dinner, Daniel. Don't stress. Just a dinner, huh?" When we pulled up to the restaurant, Gregory and Linda were already there, in full performance mode. Gregory was parked by the entrance, shaking hands like he was running for mayor. Linda was inside barking orders at the staff like she owned the place. It didn't feel like a warm family dinner. It felt like some corporate gala. The place was extravagant, white linen tablecloths, sparkling chandeliers, polished marble floors. The kind of venue that practically screams, "Look how important we are." And me? I just felt like I didn't belong there. As people started arriving, I looked around and noticed something strange. Almost everyone there was from Claire's side of the family. Aunts, uncles, cousins, plus a bunch of people I'd never even met before. Business partners of Gregory's, probably. Meanwhile, from my side, maybe 4 people, my dad, my sister, and a couple of close friends. That was it. It hit me hard. This wasn't a rehearsal dinner, it was a networking event disguised as one. I pulled Claire aside, trying to stay calm. Where's the rest of my family? I asked. She let out this tired sigh and gave me a look like I was being ridiculous. Daniel, your family's small. My parents had to fill the room somehow. Like it was nothing. Not a big deal. That was her go-to response for everything. Every concern I had, every time I felt left out, just another, not a big deal. I bit my tongue, again, and forced myself to go back and mingle. But the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that none of this was about us. This was about Gregory and Linda, about their image, their reputation. They'd hijacked a moment that was supposed to celebrate our relationship, and turned it into their own red carpet event. Then came the speeches. That's when the whole night really tipped over the edge. Gregory, of course, was the first one up. He snatched the mic like he was about to deliver a TED Talk, not say a few heartfelt words about his daughter's wedding. Gregory cleared his throat like he was about to deliver a State of the Union address and started off with, "Welcome, everyone. Tonight's about bringing two families together, our Claire, and of course, Daniel." The way he said my name. Like it was something sour he was trying to spit out. I sat there, doing everything I could to stay composed, but every sentence that came out of his mouth felt like it had a hidden punch packed inside it. He went on and on about how proud he was of Claire, how she'd always been the star of the family, how she knew what she wanted in life and chased it fearlessly. Then, with a smug little grin, he added, "And now she's marrying someone who'll keep her grounded." He said it like it was a compliment, but it landed like an insult. I saw a few people smirk. One even chuckled. I just stared at him, wondering if he actually just said that out loud. Then he pivoted to some long-winded story about Claire being a high achiever even as a kid, and how, thanks to their guidance, she stayed on the right path. And then came the kicker. "We've always taught Claire to aim high," he said, "and while Daniel might not be exactly what we envisioned at first." And then he just left it hanging. Like the unfinished thought was the punchline. I could feel my dad and my sister staring daggers at him from across the table. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Then Linda took her turn. She walked up to that mic like she was about to accept an Oscar. At first, it sounded sweet, talking about how much she adored Claire and how thrilled she was for the big day. But then the speech took a sharp turn. She started tossing out these passive-aggressive jabs like confetti. She called Claire, the perfect daughter, who deserved nothing but the best, and then looked right at me and said, "Good thing she's so patient, she's already taught Daniel so much." I nearly spit out my water. Taught me what? How to keep my mouth shut while her parents took cheap shots at me. How to smile through humiliation. Then Linda turned toward me, beaming, and said, "We're just so thrilled to welcome you into the family, Daniel. It'll be nice to finally have someone around who's not afraid to get their hands dirty, right?" She laughed at her own joke, and a few of her cousins followed suit. I looked over at Claire, praying she'd speak up, or at least look uncomfortable. But nope. She was grinning along like she was proud of the roast. And just when I thought the night couldn't get any lower, Gregory stood back up. He clinked his wine glass for attention and said, "One last thing before we wrap this up. I want to acknowledge someone who's no longer with us, someone who helped shape the man Daniel is today, his mom, Margaret." For one tiny second, I thought, maybe, he was going to show some decency. Say something respectful. I was wrong. Instead, he went, "Margaret was truly one of a kind. Always had a way of inserting herself into things, didn't she? Always had an opinion on how stuff should be done." He chuckled like it was a joke. And Linda, never one to miss a cue, added, "Oh, she definitely had opinions. Remember how she'd just jump in to help, even when nobody asked. They were talking about my mom like she was some overbearing neighbor instead of the woman who bailed them out, supported them, and never once asked for anything in return." But Gregory wasn't done. But in all seriousness, he added, "Margaret was generous. No doubt about that. Helped us out a lot. Sometimes, maybe a little too much, if I'm being honest. Then he winked. Like that last bit was a punchline to an inside joke. The room went still for a second, some folks clearly uncomfortable, but Gregory just kept rolling. We'll make sure to keep her spirit alive at the wedding. That moment right there. That's when something snapped inside me. Then Gregory dropped one final line that pushed me over the edge. Let's just hope Daniel doesn't inherit her enthusiasm for taking charge. Wouldn't want him meddling too much, right? That was it. I felt my whole face flush with heat. My fists were clenched under the table so tight my nails dug into my palms. I turned to Claire, hoping, begging, she'd say something to stop this nonsense. To defend me. To defend my mom. But all she did was laugh and say, "Oh, Dad, stop," like he was telling some cute, embarrassing childhood story. Harmless fun. Are you kidding me? They were dragging my mother's memory through the mud in front of a packed room, and Claire was smiling like it was stand-up comedy hour. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And the worst part? Gregory and Linda looked so proud of themselves. They were grinning, acting like they'd just charmed the room with their witty little roast. But I looked around, and I saw the truth. People weren't laughing. Not really. Some folks avoided eye contact, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few looked downright horrified. When Gregory finally sat down, the whole room felt like it was holding its breath. Forks clinked against plates again, glasses clinked together, but it was all forced, like everyone was trying to pretend they hadn't just watched a car crash. Claire leaned in close and whispered, "Are you okay?" Her voice was so casual, like she was asking if I wanted more bread, not if I was silently boiling with rage. I didn't say a word. I just gave a stiff nod, jaw locked tight like I was physically keeping my anger from spilling out. But then Linda made her way over to our table, her voice syrupy sweet. "Daniel," she said, like she was being so thoughtful, "I hope you weren't offended. Gregory and I were just trying to bring some humor to the evening. It's all in good fun." That's when something inside me snapped. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I stood up. My chair scraped back so loud it echoed through the room. "Are you serious right now?" I asked, voice low but trembling with fury. Everything froze. You could have heard a pin drop. The entire room turned to look at me. My chair was still half-tipped behind me, but I didn't care. My heart was thudding so hard I could hear it in my ears, but I knew, I had to speak. Gregory and Linda had already crossed so many lines, but Linda's fake, sugar-coated apology. That was the last one. I looked her dead in the eye. "Are you serious right now?" I said again, louder. She blinked like she didn't know what to do. Gregory glanced up from his drink, his face twisted into that same smug little smirk he'd worn all night, like I was the one out of line. Claire leaned toward me and whispered, "Daniel, stop." But I didn't even acknowledge her. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice rising with every word. "You spent the whole night mocking my mother, the woman who helped your family when nobody else would, and now you want to act like it was just some kind of joke. You really think that's okay?" Gregory leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms like he was bored. "Relax, Daniel," he said, smirking. "You're overreacting. It was all in good fun." "Good fun?" I snapped. "You called her meddling. You said she was too much. You mocked her generosity like it was some kind of flaw," I said, my voice sharp and tight. "How is that good fun?" The tension in the room was thick, unbearable, really. You could feel it pressing down on everyone. I glanced around and saw a few of Claire's cousins staring down at their plates, trying to look anywhere but at me. Their smiles had vanished. They weren't laughing anymore. My dad, on the other hand, looked like he was about 2 seconds away from jumping over the table. He was locked onto Gregory, eyes narrowed, fists balled. My sister had her arms crossed, her glare pinned on Linda like she was mentally preparing her own speech. Linda gave a stiff little laugh, trying to smooth it over. "Oh, Daniel," she said with this fake lightness, "don't be so sensitive. We were just sharing a few stories. Everyone knows how Margaret liked to take charge. That did it." "Take charge?" I snapped, my voice rising. "You mean helped you? She saved your business when you were about to lose everything. She paid for the oven repair, the patio renovation, Aaron's tuition. All of it." I was practically shaking now. "And this is how you honor her? By turning her into a joke at a rehearsal dinner?" Gregory finally sat up straighter, clearly done pretending to be polite. His tone turned cold. "All right, that's enough," he said, like he was disciplining a kid. "We didn't mean any harm. But if you're going to throw a tantrum over a couple of comments, maybe you're not ready for marriage." That one hit different. Not just because of the insult, but because of what it revealed, how little he thought of me, how little he thought of my mom. Then Claire finally spoke. She tugged on my sleeve and said, "Daniel, can we just go outside and talk? Please." I pulled my arm away. "No, Claire. We can't," I said, locking eyes with her. "Not until your parents understand just how disrespectful they've been." Linda let out this theatrical sigh, like she was the one under attack. Like I was ruining her night. "Daniel," she whined, "this is supposed to be a happy occasion. You're ruining the evening for everyone." I looked right at her, my voice trembling but clear. "I'm ruining it?" I said. "No, Linda. You ruined it the second you decided to tear down my mom in front of a room full of people." Then I turned to Claire. "And you just sat there and let it happen?" Her face flushed red. "I didn't know they were going to say all that," she said, defensive now. "But you laughed," I said. "You laughed at every single insult. You didn't even try to stop them." By now, I could hear whispers rippling across the room. People were leaning into each other, murmuring under their breath, throwing side eyes our way. But I didn't care. Not one bit. This wasn't about saving face anymore. It wasn't about the crowd. This was about standing up for my mother. That's when Gregory stood up. He was clearly done with the performance. "All right, Daniel," he said, pointing toward the door, "if you're that offended, maybe you should leave." For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the exit, thinking it over. For a moment, I really considered it, just walking out, letting them have their perfect little dinner party without me. Let them toast to themselves and pretend they hadn't crossed every line. But then I looked around the room. I saw my dad. My sister. A few of my closest friends who'd shown up to support me. And I realized, they were watching. Not just watching what was happening, but watching me. Waiting to see if I was going to let this slide like I had all the other times. And that's when I knew, I wasn't backing down. Not this time. "No," I said firmly, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "I'm not leaving. Not until you understand what you've done." Gregory looked like he was about to say something, but I didn't give him the chance. "You talk about my mom like she was some pushy control freak. But without her, you wouldn't even have that connection to this restaurant. You wouldn't have a business. You wouldn't have any of this." I felt my voice getting stronger, steadier with every word. She never wanted applause. She never asked for credit. She helped because she cared. And now you're sitting here making a joke out of her like her kindness was something to be embarrassed about. I scanned the room. That's not just rude. It's disgusting. Dead silence. Even Gregory looked caught off guard. Like it hadn't occurred to him that someone might actually call him out in public. Linda opened her mouth, probably searching for some smug comeback, but nothing came out. Claire just sat there, staring at her napkin like it might save her from having to choose a side. Finally, Gregory muttered, "We didn't mean it like that." I shook my head. "It doesn't matter what you meant. What matters is how it landed. You don't get to rewrite who my mom was just because it's convenient for your little story. She deserved better than that. And frankly, so do I. With that, I stepped away from the table and grabbed my coat. You want me to leave? I said, turning back toward them. Fine. But don't expect me to come back. My dad was on his feet instantly. No hesitation. My sister grabbed her purse and gave Linda a glare that could cut steel before following. A couple of my friends rose too, unsure, maybe, but still standing with me. Claire's voice rang out behind me, "Daniel, wait." But I didn't stop. I walked out of that place with my back straight and my chest tight. My heart was pounding like a war drum, but I wasn't going to let them see me shaken. Outside, my dad placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing," he said. "Your mom would be proud." I nodded. But I didn't feel proud. I felt angry. Betrayed. And, maybe worst of all, completely disillusioned. Because in that moment, it finally hit me. If Claire couldn't stand up for me, or for my mom, then maybe she was never the person I believed she was. I kept thinking walking out was the right thing. That I'd made my stand. That it was over. But the more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. If I just left things like that, Claire and her parents would twist the story. They'd paint me as the problem, the guy who couldn't take a joke, who blew everything out of proportion. No. I couldn't let that happen. This wasn't just about me. It was about my mom, her memory, and the values she raised me to stand by. I turned to my dad. Took a breath. "I need to go back in there." "What?" my sister blurted. "Why? You don't owe them anything." "I know," I said, looking her in the eye. "But I'm not leaving this half-finished. I need to make it clear, to Claire, to her parents, to everyone, that I'm done. For good." My dad paused for a second, then nodded slowly. "If that's what you need to do, we've got your back." I shook my head. "No. This is something I've got to do alone." My sister looked like she wanted to argue, but she held it in. I turned around and headed back toward the restaurant. My stomach twisted in knots. But my mind? It was clear as day. I wasn't going back in there to make more noise. I was going in to close the door. My way. When I walked through that door, heads turned. People nudged each other, whispering again. Claire was still sitting at the table, pale as a ghost, eyes wide. She stood when she saw me. "Daniel, what are you doing?" I didn't answer her. I walked straight to the front of the room, where Gregory and Linda still sat, looking far too pleased with themselves, like none of what just happened had touched them at all. Gregory raised an eyebrow as I walked up, clearly not expecting to see me again. Linda gave me that same plastic smile she'd been flashing all night. "Back so soon?" Gregory said, his voice soaked in sarcasm. I didn't bother answering him. Instead, I turned to face the entire room. "Excuse me," I said loudly enough to cut through the noise. Conversation stopped on a dime. Chairs stopped moving. All eyes were on me, again. My heart was pounding like a drum, but I kept my voice level. "I have something I need to say." I glanced at Claire. She was standing motionless by the table, hands clenched so tight her knuckles were white. I took a breath. I know this isn't what anyone expected, and I know it's not the ideal time or place. But after what happened tonight, I see no reason to wait. Another breath. "This wedding is off." The whole room exploded. Gasps, whispers, the sudden shuffle of chairs, all of it swirled into a blur as everyone looked around, trying to process what I'd just said. Claire's jaw dropped. Her hands flew up to cover her mouth. "Daniel, no," she whispered, tears welling up. I held up a hand to stop her. And just like that, the room fell dead silent again. Even the waitstaff froze where they stood, holding trays midair. I turned back to the guests. "This isn't just about tonight," I said. "It's about the kind of people I'd be marrying into, a family that doesn't respect me, doesn't respect my mother, and sure as hell doesn't respect the values I was raised with. I won't spend the rest of my life being treated like I'm not enough." Gregory finally spoke, leaning back in his chair like he still had the upper hand. "You're making a big mistake, kid. Throwing away a good thing over nothing." I gave a short, bitter laugh. "Nothing? You think mocking my mom is nothing? You think treating me like I don't measure up is nothing? No, Gregory. The real mistake would be going through with this wedding, joining a family that never saw me as an equal in the first place." Linda looked like she might cry, or maybe she was just mortified that their polished little event had blown up in front of their business friends. "Daniel," she said in a shaky voice, "let's not make decisions in the heat of the moment. Let's all cool off and talk tomorrow." I shook my head. "No, Linda. There's no tomorrow. Not for this. I'm done." Then I turned to Claire, one last time. Her face was streaked with tears, her expression torn between heartbreak and disbelief. She looked like she wanted to scream or beg, but couldn't decide which. I turned and walked toward the exit. Every step I took echoed in that painfully silent room. When I reached for the handle, I heard her voice behind me one last time. "Daniel, please don't do this." I paused, hand on the door. Then I looked back and said calmly, "I already did." And I walked out. It felt like ripping off a bandage that had been stuck for years, painful at first, but then, relief. Pure, quiet, needed relief. It was over. The wedding. The lies. The constant feeling like I wasn't good enough. All of it, done. The next morning, the fallout hit like a tidal wave. My phone was blowing up, over 100 unread messages. Claire. Gregory. Linda. Even a few of their random relatives I'd barely spoken to. The messages were all over the place. Claire's were tear-streaked apologies. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please talk to me." Gregory's were full of ego and rage. "You embarrassed us. You'll regret this. Grow up." Linda's. She leaned into the victim role. "I can't believe you do this to Claire. She didn't deserve this. You blindsided her." I didn't reply to a single one. Around mid-afternoon, I heard a knock at my door. I knew it was her before I even checked the peephole. I'd been waiting for it all day. Dreading it. Preparing for it. When I opened the door, Claire was standing there, still in the same dress from the night before. Her eyes were red and puffy, her face blotchy like she'd cried herself to sleep and never stopped. "Daniel," she said softly, voice shaky. "Can we please talk?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "What's there to talk about, Claire?" I asked flatly. "I made myself pretty clear last night." She winced like I'd just slapped her. But to her credit, she didn't walk away. "I know you're angry. And you have every right to be," she said, her voice trembling. "But, we can fix this. We can work through it." I shook my head. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't something we can just talk through and patch up." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Her voice cracked. "I was scared, okay? I didn't know what to do." "Scared of what?" I asked, my frustration bubbling up. "Of upsetting your parents? Of making a scene?" She didn't answer. Just stood there, crying, saying nothing, giving me nothing. I waited, hoping she'd say something that showed me she understood what she'd allowed to happen. But it never came. Then she stepped closer, eyes wide, voice small. "Please, Daniel," she whispered. "Don't do this. We can still make it work. I'll talk to them. I'll make them apologize. Just, don't end it like this. I looked her straight in the eye. It's not just about your parents, Claire. It's you. Last night showed me exactly who you are. And I can't pretend I didn't see it. I deserve better than this. Her face twisted in pain. I could see the moment the truth really hit her, when she realized I meant it. One Saturday afternoon, a few weeks later, I was sorting through my mom's old keepsake box. I'd kept it ever since she passed. Inside were the little things that mattered most, her favorite necklace, a pair of Sunday earrings, and a delicate silver locket with a photo of my grandmother inside. That locket had been in my family for generations. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a legacy. Before she died, my mom gave it to me and said, "One day, you'll know the right person to give this to." I'd kept it tucked away in the box ever since. Safe. Untouched. But when I opened the box that day, the locket was gone. At first, I thought I must have misplaced it. I tore through the box, checked every drawer, the shelves, even the floor nearby. Nothing. It was gone. My stomach sank. The only person who'd been in my apartment lately, other than a few close friends and family, was Claire. I remembered how she'd come by a few days after the breakup to return the engagement ring. Before leaving, she'd asked to use the bathroom. I didn't think twice at the time. But now it all made sense. I grabbed my phone and sent her a message, "Did you take the locket from my mom's keepsake box?" A few minutes passed. Then came her reply, "What are you talking about?" I didn't buy it for a second. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The locket my mom left me, it's gone. You're the only one who's been in my apartment recently. Did you take it?" The typing bubble came and went. When her reply finally landed, it made my blood boil. "I borrowed it. I wanted to keep a piece of her with me. I thought it would help me feel close to you." Borrowed. She'd taken something that wasn't hers, without asking, and tried to dress it up as something sentimental. I didn't text back. I called her. When she answered, her voice was already defensive. "Daniel, it's not a big deal," she said. "I was going to give it back." "Not a big deal?" I snapped. "That locket's been in my family for generations. It's not a souvenir. You took it. Without asking. Without telling me. How the hell did you think that was okay?" Her voice started shaking. "I just wanted to feel connected to you," she said, trying to sound soft, vulnerable. "I didn't think you'd even notice." Of course I noticed. I shouted. "It was my mom's. And the fact that you didn't think to ask me makes it even worse." She broke down crying, but I wasn't in the mood to console her. "Where is it?" I demanded, voice sharp. "It's at my parents' house," she finally admitted through sobs. I didn't want to lose it, so I left it there, for safekeeping. That was it. The last straw. "You took something that didn't belong to you, something that means more to me than you'll probably ever understand, and you just left it at your parents' place like it was some backup sweater." My voice was ice. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said flatly. "I'm coming to get it. Now." An hour later, I was pulling into Gregory and Linda's driveway. My anger had only grown with every mile. By the time I stepped out of the car and knocked on their front door, I wasn't just angry, I was done. Linda opened the door. That artificial smile she always wore faded the second she saw my face. "Daniel," she said carefully, like she was approaching a wild animal. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for my mom's locket," I said, deadpan. "Claire told me it's here." Linda's expression shifted, confused, annoyed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Claire took a locket? Why would she?" "Just get it," I cut in. She narrowed her eyes but didn't argue. She stepped aside and let me in. A few minutes later, Claire came down the stairs, holding the locket between her fingers. Her face was red and puffy. I didn't care. All I saw was the locket, my mom's locket, dangling from her hand like it was some cheap trinket. "Here," she said quietly, holding it out. I snatched it from her without a word, turning it over in my hand to make sure it was really the one. When I was sure, I stuffed it deep into my pocket and turned to go. "Daniel, wait," she called out, her voice raw and pleading. "I didn't mean to upset you. I was just trying to." "Save it," I cut her off, spinning around to face her one last time. "You didn't try to honor my mom. You stole from her. From me. Like everything else you'd already done wasn't enough." Her face crumpled. The tears started again. But I was done. I turned and walked out the door. Slammed it behind me without looking back. In the days that followed, I blocked her number. Deleted every message. Cut off every single thread connecting me to her or her family. Completely. Calling off the wedding had been hard. But this? This was the final nail in the coffin. And as exhausting as it all was, it finally gave me what I needed, closure. I'd stood up for myself. I'd stood up for my mom. And I held the line on the values she raised me with: honesty, integrity, self-respect. I knew I'd made the right choice. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I finally felt at peace.